The Galactic Military Academy floated in the darkness of space like a metal flower. It was old, very old. For 3,000 years, warriors from across the galaxy had come here to train, to fight, and to learn. The station was called Seven, and it was the most famous military school in all the known systems. Commander stood at the observation window, watching the new recruits arrive. She was a small woman with black hair tied back in a simple knot. Her uniform was neat and clean. Her eyes were calm but sharp, like a blade waiting to be drawn. She was 42 years old, and she was the only human to ever become a senior instructor at the academy. Below her in the arrival bay, dozens of aliens moved in organized lines. There were tall reptile people with 4 arms and scales that could stop a knife. There were creatures with blood that burned like acid. There were thin and pale beings who could read minds with a single touch. All of them were strong. All of them were dangerous. All of them had been chosen because their species were warriors. And then at the back of the line, there were the humans. 12 of them, young men and women from Earth and its colony worlds. They looked soft compared to the others. No scales, no claws, no natural weapons at all, just smooth skin and small bodies and eyes that watched everything around them. The door behind opened. Instructor walked in, his heavy feet making the floor shake slightly. He was a nearly 3 meters tall with dark green scales and yellow eyes. 4 arms hung at his sides, each one thick with muscle. He had been teaching combat at the academy for 300 years. He had never lost a fight. "Commander," he said, his voice deep and rough, "the new recruits are ready for assessment." Nodded but did not turn around. "I know." "I have concerns about the humans," continued. He moved to stand beside her, looking down at the arrival bay. "They are fragile. I have read the reports on their species. They break easily. They bleed easily. They die easily." "Do they?" asked. Her voice was quiet. "The data is clear. Human bones can be broken with moderate force. Human skin can be cut with any sharp edge. Human organs fail quickly without proper temperature and pressure." Shook his massive head. "I do not understand why the council approved them for military training." Finally turned to look at him. There was something strange in her eyes, something that almost looked like amusement. "You should run your scanner on them during assessment. Standard protocol." "Of course," said, "I always follow protocol." They walked together down to the combat evaluation chamber. It was a large circular room with high walls and a floor made of impact-absorbing material. Seats rose up on all sides where instructors and senior cadets could watch. Today, every seat was filled. Everyone wanted to see how the humans would perform. The 12 human recruits stood in a line at the center of the room. They wore simple training clothes, pants, and shirts. No armor, no weapons. They looked around at the aliens watching them, but none of them seemed afraid. They stood straight. They stood calm. They waited. Walked to the instructor's platform and raised one of his 4 hands. The room went silent. "Welcome to your first assessment," he announced. His voice filled the chamber. "Today I will test your basic combat reactions, speed, awareness, instinct. You will face me one at a time. You are not expected to win. You are expected to survive." He pulled out his combat scanner, a small device that wrapped around his wrist. Every instructor used one. It measured a recruit's threat level, combat potential, and recommended engagement strategy. It had been programmed with data on over 10,000 species. It had never been wrong. Pointed the scanner at the first row of recruits. Numbers and categories appeared on the small screen. Cadets registered as high threat. Cadets registered as extreme caution. Cadets registered as unpredictable. Then he pointed it at the humans. The scanner flickered, frowned, and tapped it with one finger. The screen flickered again, then displayed its results. Species human Terran. Threat level undefined. Combat potential error EXCDSPARMETRS. Recommendation: do not engage. Stared at the screen. He blinked his yellow eyes slowly. Then he ran the scan again. The same message appeared. Do not engage. Around the room, other instructors were checking their own scanners. Whispers began to spread through the observation seats. A young officer named one of his assistants laughed nervously. The scanner must be broken, he said. Look at them. They are tiny. They have no natural weapons. How can they exceed parameters? But was not laughing. In 300 years he had never seen this warning. Not once. He had scanned the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and the scanner had always given him a number, always given him a strategy. It had never simply told him not to fight. He looked up at the observation deck where Commander was standing. She was watching him with that same strange look in her eyes. Commander, he called out, the scanner is showing an error, it says. I know what it says, interrupted. Her voice was calm, steady. It says do not engage. Yes, should I recalibrate? No, placed her hands on the railing and leaned forward. The scanner is working perfectly. That warning is accurate. Silence fell over the chamber. Every alien in the room was staring at the 12 humans standing in the center of the floor. The humans looked back at them. They did not flinch. They did not look away. They simply waited, calm and patient, like they had all the time in the universe. If the warning is accurate, said slowly, then perhaps we should postpone the assessment. Perhaps we should study them more before. No, said again. This time she smiled. It was a small smile, but it changed her whole face. Suddenly she did not look like a small, soft human anymore. She looked like something else entirely, something old, something patient, something that knew exactly what it was capable of. Proceed with the assessment, she said. Standard combat protocol. They need to learn what they are, and more importantly, she looked around at all the aliens watching from the seats above. Everyone else needs to learn too. Hesitated for a long moment, then he bowed his head. As you command. He turned to face the human recruits, his 4 hands opening and closing slowly. His scanner was still flashing its warning. Do not engage, do not engage, do not engage. He ignored it. The first human to step forward was a young woman named. She was 23 years old. She had black hair cut short above her shoulders and dark eyes that seemed to notice everything. She was small, barely reaching his chest, and she weighed only 60 kilograms. To everyone watching, she looked like a child standing before a monster. Had grown up on a mining colony called New, a world where the gravity was twice as strong as Earth. Every day of her life, she had carried twice her own weight just by standing up. Every step she took was harder than it should have been. Every breath required more effort. But she had never complained. She had simply grown stronger. Now she stood in the center of the combat chamber, looking up at the massive instructor without any fear in her eyes. Studied her for a moment. His scanner was still strapped to his wrist, still flashing its impossible warning. He tried to ignore it. He tried to see what was in front of him, a small, soft creature with no claws, no armor, no weapons. State your name, and he said. New colony. Do you have any combat training? Basic self-defense, some wrestling. Her voice was calm, flat, like she was discussing the weather. Nodded slowly. He reached down and drew his training blade from his belt. It was a ceremonial weapon, passed down through generations of instructors. The edge had been dulled for safety, but it was still made of hardened metal. It could still break bones. It could still kill if used with enough force. This is a standard first contact assessment, announced loudly so everyone could hear. I will strike 3 times. Your task is simple: block or evade. Do you understand? Nodded. Take your stance. She moved her feet apart slightly and raised her hands in front of her body. Her weight shifted to the balls of her feet. Her shoulders dropped. Her breathing slowed. Several instructors in the observation seats leaned forward. Something was wrong with her stance. It was too relaxed, too open. She was leaving gaps everywhere, her head, her ribs, her legs. Any trained fighter could see a dozen ways to hit her. But Commander, watching from above, only smiled. Moved. He was fast. 300 years of combat had made his body into a perfect weapon. His arms swung down in a blur, the blade cutting through the air at nearly 200 kilometers per hour. It was a testing strike, fast enough to measure her reaction time, but controlled enough that he could stop if she failed to respond. He did not need to stop. His hand came up and caught the blade. Not deflected, not dodged, caught. Her bare fingers wrapped around the flat of the blade and her palm pressed against the edge. The impact echoed through the silent chamber like a thunderclap. Froze. His blade was motionless in her grip. He could feel her fingers against the metal, warm and soft and impossibly strong. A thin line of blood appeared where the edge touched her palm, but she did not let go. She did not flinch. She did not even blink. The room was completely silent. Every alien in the observation seats was staring with wide eyes. Some of them had stopped breathing. Some of them had forgotten how. Proceed, Commander called from above. Her voice cut through the silence like a knife. Pulled his blade back. Released it, her bloody palm still open in front of her. She looked at the cut on her hand for a moment, just a moment, then looked back up at him. She was waiting. Something cold moved through his chest. It was not fear. He had not felt fear in 200 years, but it was something close, something that made his scales tighten against his skin. He struck again. This time he did not hold back. This time he moved at full speed, a true combat swing that had killed enemies on a dozen battlefields. The blade came down toward her shoulder with enough force to cut through bone. Step to the side. The blade passed through empty air. Before could recover, her forearm came up and deflected his arm away from her body. The impact traveled through his bones like electricity. He stumbled. She had moved inside his guard. Her palm pressed flat against his chest, right over the place where his primary heart beat. Her fingers spread out against his scales. She was not pushing. She was just touching, showing him where she could have struck. If this were real, she said quietly, you would be dead. Looked down at her hand, then he looked at her face. Her dark eyes were calm, patient. There was no anger in them, no pride, just a simple statement of fact. She could have killed him. This small, soft, fragile creature could have killed him. Slowly stepped back. She lowered her hands to her sides and returned to her relaxed stance. Blood dripped from her palm onto the floor, but she did not seem to notice. She simply waited for him to continue. Scanner beeped on his wrist. Do not engage, do not engage, do not engage. The third strike, Commander called out. Complete the assessment, Instructor. Raised his blade again. His hands were steady, but something had changed behind his yellow eyes. He was not looking at like a teacher looks at a student anymore. He was looking at her like a warrior looks at another warrior. He struck. This time he used all 4 arms. 2 came from above, 2 came from the sides. It was a combination attack that no single opponent should be able to block. Even the fastest would struggle to defend against it. Moved. She did not block. She did not dodge. She flowed. Her body bent and twisted like water around rocks. His first blade passed over her shoulder. His second blade passed under her arm. His third blade met her elbow and was redirected into his fourth blade. Metal rang against metal, and then she was behind him. Her hand touched the back of his neck, right at the base of his skull, right where his spine connected to his brain, another killing point. 3 strikes, she said. Assessment complete. Then she walked past him and returned to the line with the other human recruits. She did not look back. She did not celebrate. She simply took her place and stood still, waiting for the next instruction. The chamber remained silent for a long time. Finally, Commander spoke. Her voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the room. Now you understand, she said. Now you see why the scanner says what it says. Humans do not look dangerous. We do not have scales or claws or venom. We look soft. We look weak. We look like prey. She paused. We are not prey. Turned to face her. His blade hung loose in his hand. Blood, human blood, was still wet on its edge. What are they? He asked. His voice was barely a whisper. Looked down at him from the observation deck. Behind her, her assistant was staring at his own scanner in disbelief. Around them, hundreds of alien cadets and instructors were sitting in shocked silence. They are humans, said simply. And tonight, after the assessment is finished, I will explain to you exactly what that means. She turned to the other human recruits, still standing in line. Next, she called. A young man named stepped forward. He was 19 years old, thin and quiet, with a scar on his chin from a childhood accident. He did not look like a warrior. He did not look dangerous at all. His scanner reading was exactly the same as "Do not engage." That night, Commander called a meeting in the Academy's war room. It was a large, circular chamber with dark walls and a holographic display table in the center. Maps of star systems floated in the air. Data streams scrolled across the walls. This was where the Academy's leaders planned their strategies and studied their enemies. Tonight, they would study humanity. Every senior instructor had been summoned. Sat at the front, his 4 arms crossed over his chest. His yellow eyes had not stopped watching since the assessment ended. Beside him sat representatives from a dozen other species, generals with their acid skin, advisors with their pale psychic eyes, warriors who could survive in the vacuum of space. All of them wanted answers. Stood at the center of the room, next to the holographic display. Her assistant waited nearby with a data pad, ready to bring up whatever information she requested. He was one of only 3 humans on the instructor staff, and he had been preparing for this presentation for months. Thank you for coming, began. Her voice was calm and professional. I know you have questions about what you saw today. I know your scanners gave you warnings that you have never seen before. Tonight, I will explain everything. She nodded too. The holographic display flickered and changed, showing a blue and green planet floating in space. This is Earth, said. The human. It is a medium-sized planet with moderate gravity and a temperate climate. By galactic standards, it is nothing special. There are thousands of similar worlds across the known systems. The image zoomed in, showing forests and oceans and mountains. But Earth is different from those other worlds in one important way. Earth is a death world. Murmurs spread through the room. A general leaned forward, her acid face showing interest. A death world, explain. On most planets, continued, life evolves in balance. Predators and prey develop together. Ecosystems remain stable for millions of years. But on Earth, everything is trying to kill everything else. Always, without pause, without mercy. The holographic display changed again, showing images of Earth's wildlife. Lions hunting zebras, sharks circling in dark water, wolves running through snow, snakes coiled and ready to strike. Our planet has predators everywhere, in the water, on the land, in the air, even underground. For millions of years, our ancestors lived surrounded by creatures that wanted to eat them. She paused to let this sink in. Humans are not the strongest species on Earth. We are not the fastest. We have no natural weapons, no claws, no fangs, no venom. We should have gone extinct long ago, but we survived. How? Asked. His voice was rough with confusion. What advantage did you have? Smiled. It was not a happy smile. 2 things. First, endurance. She nodded to, and the display changed to show anatomical diagrams of a human body. Humans are persistence predators. On our, we developed a hunting strategy unlike any other. We did not chase our prey quickly. We chased them slowly, for hours, for days. We followed them until they collapsed from exhaustion. The room was silent. Every alien was staring at the diagrams with a mixture of fascination and horror. Human bodies are designed for this, continued. Our cooling system, sweating, allows us to regulate temperature far better than most mammals. Our skeletal structure absorbs impact efficiently. Our cardiovascular system can operate at high capacity for extended periods. A human in good condition can run for an entire day without stopping. She let that statement hang in the air. Your prey animals, the general said slowly, they would run until their hearts gave out. Yes, they would overheat or collapse from exhaustion, and then we would walk up to them and kill them. No chase, no struggle. They were already dying when we reached them. Shifted in his seat, he was beginning to understand, but not completely. This explains endurance. It does not explain how that girl caught my blade. No, agreed. That requires explaining the second advantage, and this one is harder to understand. The holographic display changed again. This time, it showed images of human history, ancient warriors charging into battle, soldiers storming beaches under gunfire, firefighters running into burning buildings, parents lifting vehicles off trapped children. Humans bond, said. We form connections with each other that go beyond logic, beyond survival instinct, beyond self-preservation. When a human loves something, truly loves it, we become capable of things that should be impossible. She pointed to one image. It showed a small woman carrying a grown man over her shoulder while flames rose behind her. This woman weighed 55 kilograms. The man she was carrying weighed 90. She carried him 300 meters through fire and smoke with degree burns on her arms and legs. When doctors examined her later, they found that she had torn every muscle in her back. She should not have been able to walk, but she kept moving because the man was her son. The room was very quiet now. We call this phenomenon by different names: adrenaline, hysterical strength, mother's instinct, but your scientists have studied it too, looked around the room. What do your people call it? An advisor spoke up. Her voice was soft and distant like wind through empty hallways. We call it temporary biological impossibility. It appears in our records whenever we examine human subjects. We did not understand what it meant. It means that humans do not have upper limits, said. Not in the way other species do. Our bodies have safety restrictions, pain, exhaustion, fear, that prevent us from damaging ourselves. But when we fight for something we love, those restrictions turn off. We become capable of things that our own biology should not allow. She turned to face directly. That girl today, she grew up on a heavy gravity world. Every day of her life she carried twice her own weight just by existing. Her muscles are denser than they should be. Her bones are stronger than they should be. But more importantly, she has trained herself to turn off the restrictions. When she fights, she uses 100% of her body's capacity. Thought about this. He remembered the feeling of her hand catching his blade. He remembered the impossible strength in her fingers. The scanner, he said slowly. It says do not engage, this is why. Partly, his expression became serious. The scanner calculates threat based on physical capabilities and predicted behavior patterns. It can measure strength, speed, endurance, and aggression. But it cannot measure determination. It cannot measure love. It cannot measure the thing inside humans that makes us refuse to give up. She walked closer too, looking up at his towering form without any fear. The scanner warns you because it cannot predict what a human will do when we decide something matters. It cannot calculate how far we will go. It cannot determine when we will stop, because the answer is simple. She paused. We don't stop, ever. We fight until we win or we die, and even death does not always stop us. The war room was completely silent. Stepped forward. He was young, only 25, but he had served in the human military before joining the academy. He had seen combat. He had seen what humans could do. In our history, he said quietly, There are thousands of stories of humans who kept fighting after they should have died. Soldiers who continued firing their weapons after losing arms. Parents who protected their children with their own bodies. Pilots who crashed their ships into enemy targets because they could not survive but they could still cause damage. He looked around the room at all the alien faces watching him. You see us and you see small, soft creatures. That is what we look like. But inside us is something else. Something that has been forged by millions of years of survival against impossible odds. When you fight a human, you are not fighting a body. You are fighting a will, and our will does not break. Was quiet for a long time, then he nodded slowly. I understand, he said. The scanner is not measuring physical threat. It is measuring something else, something it cannot calculate. Yes, confirmed. It is measuring potential, and human potential has no upper limit. She looked around the room one last time. Now you know what humans are. Now you know why the galaxy should pay attention. We are not here because we are strong. We are here because we are stubborn, because we refuse to accept defeat, because when something matters to us, we will tear reality apart to protect it. She smiled, and for just a moment, everyone in the room saw something ancient and terrifying looking out through her eyes. Welcome to the future of galactic warfare. Humanity has arrived. 3 months passed. The human recruits trained alongside their alien classmates. They learned combat techniques from a dozen different species. They studied weapons and tactics and strategy. They grew stronger every day. But most importantly, they became family. The 7 human recruits in Training Squad 12 spent every moment together. Was their unofficial leader, calm, patient, always thinking 3 steps ahead. Was the youngest, only 19, but he never complained and never gave up. There was who could hit targets at impossible distances, who could move without making any sound, who was built like a wall and hit like an earthquake, who could solve any problem and hack any system, and who had a joke for every situation and a smile that never faded. They were more than teammates. They were brothers and sisters. They would die for each other without hesitation. On a cold morning in the 3rd month, death came for all of them. Commander was away from the station, called to a diplomatic meeting 3 star systems away. She had left Instructor in charge, trusting him to keep the academy safe. He could not. The attack came from nowhere. 50 warships dropped out of hyperspace and surrounded Station 7 before anyone could respond. They belonged to a pirate coalition called the Hollow, raiders and slavers who preyed on the outer systems. They had learned about the Academy's location. They had come for weapons, ships, and hostages. The station's defenses were overwhelmed within hours. Hollow soldiers poured through the eastern docking bays, killing anyone who resisted. They were mostly a species of tall, thin humanoids with skin and black eyes. They were professional killers, armed with plasma rifles and neural disruptors that could shut down a nervous system with a single touch. Instructor the defenders and led them toward the central compound. Cadets and instructors fell back through the corridors, fighting for every meter, but they were outnumbered 4-1. They were losing. And Training Squad 12 was cut off. And her 6 teammates were in the eastern training sector when the attack began. They had been running combat drills, practicing close quarters fighting with training weapons. When the explosion started, they tried to rejoin the main group. But Hollow soldiers had already blocked every route to the central compound. They were trapped. Pulled out her scanner and swept the corridors ahead. Her face went pale. 47 hostiles between us and the safe zone, she reported. All mercenaries, plasma rifles and neural disruptors, heavy armor. Weapons asked. Check their supplies. His face was grim. Training batons, 2 stun pistols, some smoke grenades. That's it. That's it. The 7 humans looked at each other. By any reasonable calculation, they should surrender. They should hide and wait for rescue. They were outnumbered, and facing professional soldiers who had been killing for centuries. Laughed. It was not a nervous laugh. It was a real laugh, warm and genuine and completely inappropriate for their situation. "Well," he said, "I always wanted to be a legend." Did not smile, but something changed in her eyes, something hard and cold and absolutely certain. "We're not dying here," she said, "and we're not surrendering, so there's only one option left." She picked up a training baton, a simple metal rod blunted at both ends. It was meant for practice. It was not meant to kill. But in the right hands, anything could be a weapon. "We go through them." Nobody argued. Nobody hesitated. They simply nodded and followed her into the darkness. The hollow soldiers moved through the eastern sector in standard formation. 3 in front, 2 on each side, the rest following behind. They expected no resistance. Their scanners showed only 7 life signs ahead, small readings, probably cadets or civilians. Easy targets. The first soldier died without seeing his killer. Dropped from a ventilation shaft above him, her legs wrapped around his neck. She twisted. The crack of his spine echoed through the corridor. Before his body hit the ground, she had taken his rifle. The other soldiers turned toward the sound. They were fast. Reflexes were among the best in the galaxy. But humans had something better than reflexes. Humans had practice. Appeared from the shadows to the left. Her stun pistol fired twice. 2 soldiers fell. Their neural systems scrambled. Came from the right, silent as death, her training baton crushing the throat of another soldier before he could raise his weapon. Then arrived. He did not bother with stealth. He simply walked through the front line like a force of nature. The first soldier shot him. Plasma burned through his shoulder. He grabbed the soldier by the face and slammed his head into the wall. The second soldier stabbed at him with a combat knife. He took the knife away and stabbed back. The corridor became chaos. Moved through the fighting like water through rocks. She did not stop. She did not hesitate. Every movement had purpose. Every strike found its target. Soldiers fell around her like leaves in a storm. But there were too many, always too many. Was covering the rear when 3 soldiers came around the corner behind them. He had only a training baton, a simple metal stick against plasma rifles. He should have run. He should have called for help. Instead, he attacked. The first soldier shot him in the chest. Plasma burned through his armor and seared his flesh. The pain was beyond anything he had ever felt, but he did not stop. He kept moving forward. He brought his baton down on the soldier's wrist, breaking bone. He grabbed the rifle as it fell and turned it on the second soldier. The third soldier hit him with a neural disruptor. It should have stopped him. It should have shut down his entire nervous system. It did not. His body was dying. His nerves were screaming. Every cell in his body was telling him to fall, to quit, to surrender to the pain. But something deeper than his body refused to listen. Something in his spirit kept burning. He turned around and beat the third soldier to death with his bare hands. Then he fell. Reached him first. She pressed her hands against his wounds, trying to stop the bleeding. "Stay with me." His eyes were unfocused. Blood bubbled from his lips, but he was still smiling. "Did we win?" "Not yet," appeared beside them. Her face was covered in blood, none of it hers. She looked down with something that might have been grief if she had time for grief. "Keep him alive. The rest of you, we keep moving." They fought through corridor after corridor. They used every trick they had learned. They set ambushes in stairwells. They collapsed ceilings on enemy positions. They turned the training sector into a killing ground, using every doorway and corner as a weapon. Took a plasma bolt to the leg halfway through. He kept fighting, using a dead soldier as a crutch. Was stabbed through the arm but used the same arm to strangle her attacker. Ran out of ammunition and switched to throwing knives she had taken from fallen enemies. One by one, the hollow soldiers fell. When Commander's rescue force finally broke through to the eastern sector, they found 7 humans standing in a corridor filled with corpses. 47 mercenaries lay dead around them. The walls were burned and bloody. The floor was covered with fallen weapons. Was sitting against the wall, one hand pressed to a wound in her side. Her other hand still held her training baton, the same simple metal rod she had started with. It was bent now, twisted and covered in blood. Walked through the corridor slowly, stepping over bodies. Her face showed no expression, but her eyes were shining with something that might have been pride. "Report," she said quietly. Looked up at her. She was exhausted, she was wounded, but she was alive. "Training sector secure, Commander." Her voice was hoarse but steady. 7 humans, 47 hostiles, no survivors. She paused. We proceeded anyway. Knelt beside her. For a moment she was not a commander. She was just a woman looking at another woman who had done something impossible. "Yes," she said softly, "you did." Behind them, medics were rushing to help and the others. Stretchers were being brought. Emergency treatment was being prepared. All 7 humans would survive. They would carry scars for the rest of their lives, but they would live. And the galaxy would never forget what they had done. The news spread across the galaxy like fire. Within days, every major news network was telling the story of Station 7. They called it the Eastern Corridor Massacre. They called it the Impossible Victory. They called it the moment everything changed. 7 humans, training weapons, 47 dead mercenaries. The numbers did not make sense. Analysts studied the battle recordings and could not explain what they were seeing. Military experts from 100 different species watched the footage again and again, trying to understand how it was possible. The Hollow Coalition had been the most feared pirate group in the outer systems. They had raided stations and colonies for 50 years. They had never been defeated. Within 3 months of the battle, the Hollow was gone. Their members scattered across the galaxy, hiding in dark corners, afraid to show their faces. They were not destroyed by military force. They were destroyed by fear. No one wanted to fight humans anymore. 6 months after the attack, the Academy held a memorial ceremony. It was meant to honor all the cadets and instructors who had died during the battle, but everyone knew the real reason for the gathering. Everyone wanted to see the 7 humans who had survived. Commander stood at the front of the great assembly hall. Behind her, a new statue had been built into the wall. It showed 7 figures standing back to back, facing outward in all directions. Their faces were calm. Their hands were empty. They looked ordinary. They looked human. Every seat in the hall was filled. Thousands of cadets from hundreds of species sat in perfect silence, watching. Instructors lined the walls. Diplomats and generals had traveled from across the galaxy to attend. They all wanted to understand what humans were. Stepped up to the speaking platform. She wore her formal uniform, black and silver, with medals she had earned over 20 years of service. Her black hair was tied back in its usual simple knot. Her face was calm, but her eyes held something fierce. "Thank you all for coming," she began. Her voice carried through the silent hall. "Today we remember those who fell defending this academy. We honor their sacrifice. We carry their memory forward." She paused, looking out at the sea of alien faces. "But I want to talk about something else today. I want to talk about what happened in the eastern sector. I want to talk about 7 young people who did something impossible." The holographic display behind her flickered to life. It showed the 7 members of Training Squad 12, their official photos taken on their first day at the academy. They looked so young, so ordinary. Spoke each name slowly, clearly. 6 months ago, these 7 recruits were trapped behind enemy lines. They had training weapons. They had no armor. They faced 47 professional soldiers with plasma rifles and neural disruptors. The images changed, showing recordings from the battle. Shaky footage. Screams and gunfire, dark corridors lit by muzzle flashes. By every calculation, they should have died. By every measure of probability, they should have surrendered. No one would have blamed them. No one would have expected anything more. His voice grew harder. But they did not surrender. They did not give up. They fought through every corridor, every room, every meter of ground. They took wounds that should have killed them and kept moving. They faced death and refused to blink. She turned to look at the statue behind her. And when it was over, they were the only ones standing. The hall was completely silent. Every alien in the room was staring at the holographic images, at the young human faces that had done something their species could not explain. For 3,000 years, this academy has trained warriors, continued. We have studied every species in the galaxy. We have their strengths, they have their scales, they have their acid blood, they have their psychic powers, that can survive in vacuum. She turned back to face the crowd. But humans have something else. We have each other. The holographic display changed one more time. It showed the 7 survivors as they were now, standing together at the back of the hall. Was at the front, her short black hair neatly combed, her dark eyes calm and steady. Beside her stood, still thin and quiet, with new scars visible on his neck and hands. The others flanked them, and all of them marked by the battle but unbroken. They stood shoulder to shoulder, facing forward, just like the statue. Humans do not fight because we are strong, said. We fight because we cannot accept losing the people we love. We fight because standing alone is not possible for us. We form bonds that go beyond logic, beyond survival, beyond death itself. She stepped away from the platform and walked toward the 7 survivors. The crowd parted silently before her. When a human decides something matters, truly matters, we become something that cannot be measured, cannot be predicted, cannot be stopped. We will break our own bodies. We will destroy our own minds. We will burn everything we have to protect what we love. She stopped in front of. The 2 women looked at each other, commander and recruit, teacher and student, human and human. The scanner warns, do not engage, said. Not because we are the strongest species in the galaxy, not because we are the fastest or the most deadly, but because once a human chooses to fight, there is no force in the universe that can make us stop. She looked past at the other 6 survivors, at their faces and steady eyes, at the family they had become through blood and fire. That is what it means to be human. We do not win because we are supposed to win. We win because we refuse to lose. And when the universe tells us, do not engage, we look it in the eye and we say, proceed anyway. 7 voices finished in unison. The words echoed through the great hall. Every alien in the room heard them. Every species, every culture, every civilization represented in that gathering understood what they were witnessing. This was not just a memorial. This was a warning. This was a promise. Humanity had arrived. Turned back to face the crowd. Her voice rose, filling every corner of the massive chamber. The galaxy is vast and old. It has seen empires rise and fall. It has watched species evolve and go extinct. It has endured for billions of years. She paused. But it has never seen anything like humanity, and it never will again. She raised her hand in salute, a human gesture that every alien in the room had learned to recognize. For those who fell, for those who fight, for those who refuse to surrender, we remember, we honor, we proceed. 7 hands rose to match her salute. 7 humans stood together, bound by something stronger than blood. In the crowd, Instructor watched silently. His scanner was in his pocket, turned off. He did not need it anymore. He understood now. Humans were not dangerous because of what they could do. They were dangerous because of what they would not do. They would not give up. They would not abandon each other. They would not stop. And that made them the most terrifying species in the galaxy. The ceremony ended. The crowd dispersed. but the 7 survivors remained standing in front of the statue, looking up at the stone figures that represented them. Was the first to speak. His voice was quiet, still rough from the damage to his throat. "What happens now?" Looked at him. Then she looked at the others, at the family she would die for without hesitation. "Now we train," she said. "Now we get stronger. Now we show the galaxy what humans can really do." She smiled. It was a small smile, but it held something fierce. "We proceeded anyway once. We can do it again." Around them, the academy continued its work. Cadets trained. Instructors taught. Ships came and went. The galaxy kept spinning, ancient and vast and full of wonders. But something had changed. Something had shifted. Humanity was no longer a minor species from an unremarkable planet. Humanity was a force, a fire, a promise. The scanner said, "Do not engage." And across the galaxy, everyone was finally listening.